Hello readers, I'm the Avid reader and today we're reviewing Salem's Lot, written by Stephen King in 1975. So this is Stephen King's second published novel, and of course it's a horror book. It's about 600 pages, but in really big letters, so a similar size to The Shining. And this book is about vampires, and it occurs in Jerusalem Lot, Maine. And there's a lot of horror in this book, as you have vampires in it. And it's a really big cast of characters. You have half a dozen main characters and then a lot of secondary characters. And the book is in 3 parts, and there's a prologue and an epilogue. So before I continue, there will be spoilers in this review and some graphic content. So the prologue is just about a man and a boy doing some stuff, and it doesn't really make sense what's happening in the prologue until you come to the end of the book. So writing a prologue and you understand nothing when you read it, I didn't really like that. The first part of the book is called Marsten House, and the main character is Ben Mears, who's a writer, of course, and he's returning to Jerusalem's Lot. So Salem's Lot is short for Jerusalem's Lot, and he's returning to write a book about the Marsten House. And there he develops a relationship with Susan Norton, who's a fan of his books. He meets her parents. Her father likes him, but her mother doesn't. We get some backstory that when he was young, he went into the Marsten house as a dare, and there he saw something that looked half dead open its eyes, so he was scared by that and he has had nightmares from it. He wanted to rent out the Marsten house to get the ambience on writing his story, but a duo called Richard Straker and Kurt Barlow have bought the house. And Straker also opens a shop, and he's quite a charismatic person, but you can see that there's something weird behind that face. And we don't know what's happening with Kurt Barlow, although during the night there's a stalking tall figure who talks to some people and turns them into vampires, and that turns out later on to be Kurt Barlow. There are a couple of kids who go out in the evening because they're gonna go and see some cool stuff from some other kid, but in the woods they are attacked. So one of the kids disappears forever. We never see him again, I think, and the other returns, seems fine, he's sent to the hospital, and then suddenly dies. There are a few characters who suddenly die. And Ben Mears meets Matt Burke, who's a teacher. And he's the smartest guy in this book, by the way. And there's a lot of ex-students of Matt Burke, so he invites one of them to his home. But at midnight, he hears something weird. And the ex-student lets that thing in, and he hears some sucking noises and some child laughs. And that's one of the many horrifying moments in this book. So this book develops horror successfully. However, in the first part, we get a bunch of backstory to a bunch of secondary characters, and we get to see a couple of them, I think, turned into vampires by this Kurt Barlow. But since there are so many characters and you're going from one to the other, it's a bit confusing. Also, a couple of them have very similar names. So during the first 100 pages of this book, a lot of it I didn't really enjoy. It was boring, went over your head. It's not memorable. So one of the flaws of Salem's Lot is its first 100 pages. And there are passages in this book that are just too long, too much world building of the town. And I would say this book would be a better one if it was more concise. So the second part is called Emperor of Ice Cream. And since you've had a kid that's died at Matt Burke, he calls Ben Mears. And Matt Burke basically tells him he's heard some vampire stuff, and Ben Mears believes him. And they do a cover-up story for the police and the doctor. Ben Mears also believes in vampires, so he tells this to Susan Norton, and he sends her over to Matt Burke to talk. And Matt Burke talks with her. Then he hears a weird noise upstairs. He goes up. There's a vampire there. He banishes it with his cross. There's a lot of crosses in this book, and they help you from vampires. But he suddenly has a heart attack. So for the rest of the book, he's incapacitated and in a hospital bed. But he still manages to help the crew who are trying to stop these vampires throughout the story. They decide to tell Jimmy Cody about the vampire thing. So Jimmy Cody goes with Ben Mears up to a morgue to see one woman who has died suddenly. There are a lot of people who have suddenly died, oddly. But that woman awakes. It attacks them. Jimmy Cody is bitten, and they manage to kill her. And Jimmy Cody puts a bunch of disinfectant on him, so he doesn't turn into a vampire. So there is kind of a remedy. When you're bitten by a vampire, you really need to put some disinfectant very quickly, some different stuff on you, and then you'll be fine. So now Jimmy Cody believes them, and they're thinking of bringing in Father Callahan on this, who's a drunk Catholic priest, but he's a good person. But Susie Norton goes out on her own to the Marsten house, and here you've also got Mark Petrie, who's a kid. And Mark Petrie, he's been throughout the story. He's a pretty smart kid. He understands this vampire stuff quite a lot, and he's been researching it quite a lot also. And they enter the house, I think, through a shutter or some window thing. And they're about to go down One of them brought a gun, I think, and they're knocked out by Straker. So Susan Norton is given to Kurt Barlow, who turns her into a vampire, and Mark Petrie is tied up upside down. But when he's tied up, he does this thing with his fists. He concentrates, he holds in his breath so that he will be made bigger, so that when he breathes out, the ties will loosen and he can start wiggling out. And he does so successfully. And then he hears Richard Straker coming back, so he hides behind the door. He takes a metal piece from a chair, I think, and he bangs it on Richard Straker twice. And Richard Straker grabs him, but he escapes. And Kurt Barlow calls out to him to come, but after some hesitation and almost coming to him, he leaves the house instead of listening to the vampire. He goes back to his parents, and then he goes to the crew and tells them all he knows. Now, part 3 is a deserted town. So during the beginning here, a bunch of people are being turned into vampires. Although this is secondary characters, so you don't really care about them. They're devising at the hospital how they're gonna kill Kurt Barlow. They've been lying to the police and have a good cover story for different events that have happened. For example, the murder situation. Father Callahan is recruited to the ranks, and since they say they need help of the Catholic Church, he provides it for them, and he blesses some things. He brings a cross, they bring a bunch of steaks. But I think it's Father Callahan and Mark Petrie have gone to his parents to convince them for help. And Mark Petrie's father is a pretty smart man, but he denies all of these things. And then the lights go off, the electricity is cut off, and Kurt Barlow arrives. And he knocks the Petrie parents' heads together, killing them instantly. And Mark Petrie tries to attack the vampire. The vampire captures him, and Father Callahan pulls out his cross. The vampire backs off, but he still has Mark Petrie in his grip, threatens to hurt him. So he basically challenges Father Callahan to a fight. Throw away your cross, I'll throw away the boy. And as a sign of goodwill, he throws away the boy. The boy runs off, but Father Callahan hesitates, doesn't throw away his cross, and then the strength of the glowing cross becomes worthless. Barlow is able to pick it up and snap it in two, and then he grabs Father Callahan and he forces Callahan to drink some of Kurt Barlow's blood. So now Father Callahan, I think, is cursed. He tries to return to his church, but he's unable to, and he leaves town on a bus, going far away, never to be seen again in this story. The crew are exploring different houses to find Kurt Barlow. They are planning things, getting weapons together. With the help of Matt Burke, Jimmy Cody, and Mark Petrie, who has returned to the hospital, realize where the house is, where Kurt Barlow is hiding. So they go there, but the stairs have been removed, and Jimmy Cody falls onto a bunch of knives, so he's impaled. But Mark Petrie avoided falling, so you can see that Mark Petrie is a very skilled boy. So Mark Petrie returns to Ben Mears, who's gone to the Petrie's house, and together they go to the house where Kurt Barlow is hiding. They go down by putting some floorboard there. They see the body of Jimmy Cody. They throw down some shelving, and there they find a small door, and they hack away at it with an axe. And in there they find the chest of Kurt Barlow. And they try to carry the chest away, but the eyes of Kurt Barlow are open. And Mark Petrie is bewitched, so he tries to attack Ben Mears. They struggle for a gun. Ben Mears punches Mark Petrie, so Mark Petrie becomes a regular boy again. Ben Mears is half controlled by the voice of Kurt Barlow, but he manages to resist it, takes a stake, takes a hammer, and plows it into the vampire's heart. And it's quite a disgusting, horrifying scene, reading how the vampire is disintegrating into a skeleton, with the only thing remaining of the vampire then are the teeth. There are other vampires there who awake, but they don't attack Ben Mears and Mark Petrie, since they have some safe things that protect them from them. And they escape. They drive out of Jerusalem's lot. The remaining residents are turned into vampires by some vampires' cunningness. And in the epilogue, Ben Mears tries to bring Mark Petrie back to normal. He returns to the town during the dawn, buries Jimmy Cody and the Petrie parents, and then leaves. And later on they return, a long time after I think, and they throw down a match in the forest which will burn down the town. That's the story. And since this is a special edition, there is also a couple of short stories related to Salem's Lot. So how would I rate Salem's Lot? I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. There's great horror in here. However, I didn't really like the first 100 pages. Most of it I think you could have cut out, or you could have heavily reduced it. And there are too many secondary characters. Yeah, it's interesting when they're turned into vampires, but I don't really care about their backstory. So you could have turned them into vampires without adding the background to it. I don't think you need background for turning characters into vampires, really. or you could have had shorter scenes with them, not put in 20 characters where most of them you don't even care about. But I grant, there are a lot of good, horrifying scenes, and that's why it's a great book, and it's a 9 out of 10. And you can compare Salem's Lot to it if you want. Salem's Lot has too many pages. However, I would say you can probably shorten this book by about 10%. However, it you could probably shorten by 20-25%. So Salem's Lot has a lot of boring scenes, but a lot less boring scenes than in it. And as the story moves along, it starts to really pick up. So the book gets better and better, although there are some minor boring moments. So overall, it's a great book. If you want to be horrified by vampires, read this book. And by the way, I've heard that this book is connected to the Dark Tower series later on. If I've understood correctly, this is good background reading before you start reading at least the later Dark Tower books. So this was the Avid Reader's review of Salem's Lot, written by Stephen King in 1975. It got a 9 out of 10. I hope you readers enjoyed this book review, and I will see you readers next time.